I am so excited to share the build with you this week. It is a strength-based bully of a bard. This character ain't seducing nobody. They are a dirge, smacking their enemies around the battlefield, bowling them over, and just putting them into a Catch-22, where the enemy is going to be damned if they do and damned if they don't. Oh, and we'll be doing it all with a weapon I've almost never used in a build before. It's gonna be awesome. Welcome to D4. Hey everybody, so here at D4, each week I take a deep dive into character builds for my favorite role-playing games. I like to crunch numbers about them, I like to theorycraft about them, not so that I can tell you the right way or the best way to play a character, but to explore one potential way to build something in the hopes of creating a character that's both really fun, but also really powerful to play. So if you also enjoy building characters for your favorite role-playing games, or if you're just really into theorycrafting, or if you're looking for tips or ideas on how to build something that you're thinking about playing, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I'm so glad that you're here, so thank you for watching. My name's Colby. Right, so one of my favorite things about the updated 5e rules from 2024, weapon masteries. I love them so much that I ended up gushing about them in an interview with Wizards of the Coast a couple of months ago, and they ended up putting a part of that interview into a little, I don't know, like commercial short video, I suppose, that came out a couple of weeks ago. Check it out here if you're curious. Weapon masteries just add an awesome bit of like flair, utility, power, and maybe above all, fun and versatility for martial characters. They might not single-handedly close the gap between spellcasters and martials or anything, but they do a bit to move that needle and also make choosing weapons interesting again. There's now a lot more to picking your weapon as a weapon-using character than just what do I think looks coolest or which weapon does the most damage, right? And I love that. Case in point, the pike. Longtime viewers of the channel know that I've done a ton of 2014 5e builds that combined the Polearm Master feat and the Great Weapon Master feat. It was an incredibly powerful combo under the old rules. But with only a single exception, every time I used a polearm in a build, it was never a pike. Usually it was a halberd or a glaive because the pike didn't get the bonus action like butt attack, right, from Polearm Master. So the only time I used it was in that Ultimate Crit Fisher build from way back when, where I was looking for ways to get as much as I could out of a critical hit, and the pike worked well because it was the only heavy weapon that did piercing damage, so we got a little extra from it with the piercer feat. But now we've got weapon masteries, and the pike, as a result, gets to pick up another thing that makes it unique. It's the only weapon that has the reach property and the heavy property, and, most importantly of all for us today, the push weapon mastery, which is actually pretty hard to come by. It's the most uncommon weapon mastery, showing up only 4 times. And today, I want to build around this weapon because I think that combo of weapon properties and mastery make it super fun and powerful. But that's not actually where the inspiration for the build came from today originally. I first started this build with the desire to do an updated version of my Catch-22 build from a few years ago. Check it out there. That build was one of my favorites that I ever put together because I thought it was just so like clever and kind of sinister, maybe? I can't even take credit for the original idea. It was one of my like original subscribers to the channel and commenters whose name escapes me, but I credit them in that video if you watch it. But yeah, the idea of putting an enemy in a situation where they're sort of trapped with no good options, right? Move or don't move on your turn. Either way, you're gonna take damage. It was just really fun and also powerful. I enjoyed it so much that I ended up playing a version of that build in a couple of different one-shots. But to get the most out of the build, you need to be able to move enemies and have access to a couple of important spells, and I knew that thanks to weapon masteries, a buff to a certain bard subclass, and some other changes, that the character concept would probably be better than ever in the 2024 rules. So today is the day that I finally give it a fresh coat of paint. You ready to jump in with me? I proudly present D&D episode number 217, the Bully Bard. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. The hammer and anvil. Clouds to the left of me, explosions to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you. Pike, your poison. Knives out. The thundercloud. That is a really good one. I almost went that way. Judge Shred. Thanks as always to everyone in the Discord server for the suggestions. Some really great ones. But I think this time I'm just gonna keep it boring, sorry, and go with the new Catch-22. Huge thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton for the fantastic artwork that he put together for this build. He does this every week. I love this one. That cloud of daggers especially is awesome. If you'd be interested in following Randall to see the other stuff that he's done, or to maybe even potentially commission him to create some art for your character or even your entire party, I'll put links in the video description as always on how to do so. But first, I am super excited to spread a little more love for Tabletop Table, the sponsor of today's video. Last time I showed you guys how great this table worked on like a smaller table, like my coffee table that I have in my living room. But here's the thing. I even love using my brand new tabletop table on a larger table like this gaming table that I have in my basement. First of all, I mean, it's gorgeous. Look at this thing. And it comes in two different varieties. The Hex Light, which is a lighter weight, kind of travel and budget friendly model. It's made from premium grade injection molded plastic. Or this beauty, the Relic model, crafted from premium walnut hardwood, which, yeah, is just gorgeous, right? But yeah, using this even on like a slightly bigger table just makes it so nice to give you a little more room for all of the resources that you actually use when you're gaming, right? Like this. I mean, you know, it just makes it so nice. I've got so much more room for, you know, resource books. I've got my tablet with my character sheet on it, my spell cards here, my magic rocks. You know, your snacks can fit nicely under the table. You got room for your beverages. And I just feel a little closer to the action, you know? This thing is ingenious and yet so very simple. It's foldable. It comes in its own handy carrying case so that you can take it with wherever you want to be playing, and takes literally less than a minute to set up. And once you've got it, you can play on pretty much any table and have all the room you need, no matter how big or small your table might be. Or heck, even if you gotta sit on the floor, right? I might be bringing this with me to Gen Con this year, actually. Maybe I'll pick up a Hexlite model for that. It would be awesome to just have like an instant table to play with while you're waiting in line for a panel, or maybe at your friend's hotel room. So yeah, Tabletop Table is in Kickstarter right now at the time of this video release. And as I'm recording this, at least, which is 2 weeks ago for those of you watching, they are this close to hitting their funding goal. They've probably passed it by now, but you really should click on the link in the video description in the pinned comment just to make sure, because the Kickstarter ends June 30th. And then while you're there, please consider backing them. If you use my link, you'll get 10% off, and you'll help them either hit that funding goal or more likely hit their next stretch goal so that they can add even more awesomeness to this already awesome product. You won't regret it. All right. Huge thanks to Tabletop Table. I really love what you guys have built here. I can't wait to see it go into full production. And I really appreciate your support. Okay, let's get back to the build. All right, at level 1, for our Bard build today, we're starting Fighter, naturally. Okay, so yeah, one potential problem with trying to build a spellcaster like Gishy character who really wants weapon masteries. No spellcaster gets them. And I mean, arguably, that's how it should be, right? Don't give all the martial goodies to the casters. They're powerful enough. But a little level dip to pick them up is a nice way to sacrifice a bit of your spellcaster power so that you can have your cake and eat it too. And of course, going Fighter at level 1 just gives us so much. Constitution saving throw proficiency for better concentration checks, among other things. And our concentration spell is going to be doing a lot of work on this character, both for damage and concept, actually. So protecting concentration, super important. But then the weapon and armor proficiencies are also nice. The weapon mastery, of course, even a handy fighting style. It makes a delicious dip. For our species, I want to go with my new 2024 favorite, the Goliath, primarily because of the fantastic way you can get some fun flavor and power by picking up a giant ancestry. And for us, I think we should go with the Frost Giant ancestry here. This tells us that proficiency bonus times per day. When we hit with an attack and do damage, we can add a d6 of cold damage to the target and reduce their speed by 10 feet until the start of our next turn. We'll see why this is super useful for us a bit later. For our background, I'm going to say I really want to take either an old background that we can kind of modify ourselves as per the PHB in 2024, right? or a custom one as per the Dungeon Master's Guide. If you can't do either of those things, I'd probably take Sage if I had to, but yeah, I'm going to be annoyed by it because Sage doesn't give me the ability score increases that I want. It does give the right origin feat though, and that is, as it so often is, the Magic Initiate Wizard, which lets us pick up a couple of wizard cantrips and a first level wizard spell that we can access once per day or more with spell slots, right? And yeah, I'll take Find Familiar so that I can ask that familiar to take the help action and hopefully grant me advantage on my first attack. Nope, I'm not getting into the weeds on the mechanics and the rules this time. Check out the short here if you want to break down and to fight about it. But actually, the main reason I wanted this feat today is not for the familiar, it's so I can get the Booming Blade cantrip, which is not available to bards. I love Booming Blade, and it's again very important to the build, both for damage and for the concept. For the uninitiated, when you cast the spell, you simultaneously make a weapon attack, and if you hit, deal extra thunder damage, once you get to level 5, that is. And then if they move before your next turn, they take even more thunder damage, and that's exactly what we love about the spell. For starting ability scores, I assume we go the point buy method as always and say, let's take a 15 strength and a +2 there, 15 charisma and a +1, and then a 14 constitution, assuming, of course, that you've been able to use an older custom background, right? If you can't, you might want to rethink your leveling progression here, which I'll talk about in a bit. So yeah, we're dumping dexterity, which means for equipment, we want to start out with chainmail armor, right? So that we can have a solid armor class still. And yeah, heavy armor proficiency is another big reason for starting level 1 as a fighter here. With our dumped dexterity, we really need it. And then yes, grab yourself a pike. As I've said, pikes are awesome. They have reach so that you can attack from 10 feet away, which will actually be really useful on this build. They do a solid D10 of damage. They are heavy and come with the fantastic and rare push weapon mastery. And since we get 3 weapon masteries as a fighter 1, we will want to take the pike, of course, that has the push weapon mastery so that when we hit a large or smaller creature with it, we can push them 10 feet straight away from ourselves, and that's perfect. I think I would also want to take mastery in the maul so that I could topple enemies to potentially knock them prone, right? If they fail their saving throw against it, and maybe even the whip so that I could slow them by 10 feet and still attack them from 10 feet away, which could be really cool when coupled with our Frost Giant Slow. Yeah, kind of like I did with the Cool Whip build a few months ago, though that one was much better at slowing and snaring enemies than this will be. At Fighter 1, we also get Second Wind so that we can heal ourselves with a bonus action once per short rest, and then a fighting style. And I think I would probably go either defense to raise my armor class by 1. I'm not using a shield with this build, so getting a little AC love would be nice. Or maybe the blind fighting style so that I could have blind sight out to 10 feet, just in case I was put into darkness or a fog cloud or was fighting an invisible enemy, etc., right? It's one of those like useless when you don't need it, but amazing when you do features. That is also just really cool. And remember, Goliaths don't have dark vision, so this is extra good on Goliath, I think. Speaking of extra good, like the goodest, I want to give a quick shout out to my channel members and patrons. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for your support. I could not do what I do without you. So yeah, thanks. If you're not a member of the channel, I'd love it if you'd consider joining or supporting on Patreon. Check in the video description. There's links on how to do so and what that entails. I give perks to all of my channel members and patrons so long as they just sign up at like the silver level or higher. I just ask that you pay what you feel you can afford and what you think it's worth. Those perks include access to the library of write-ups that I create for all of my builds to help you recreate it yourself a little more easily, access to the community Discord server, and even access to the live monthly Q&A hangout sessions that we do. If you're not interested in becoming a member, don't feel like you can contribute in that way or whatever, that's totally fine. If you'd like the video and subscribe to the channel and maybe tell your friends about it, like those are great ways to support the channel too, so thanks. All right, at level 2, with all of those amazing features from Fighter 1, yes, let's start getting ourselves some bard levels now. And yeah, we are going to be a strength-based bard, mostly at least. So what's your story? You started out as a thug or a bouncer or a bodyguard or a soldier, right? But became enamored by the haunting melodies of your ward that you're protecting, right? They're a world-class performer performer and you decided to try your hand at music or storytelling yourself, maybe. Maybe you simply come from a long line of dirge-like tale weavers who inspire allies and terrify enemies with their songs or chants of battlefield glory. Whatever your reason, yes, as a Bard 1, we get Bardic Inspiration first up, which says that charisma modifier times per day, we can use a bonus action to inspire our allies so that sometime within the next hour they can roll our Bardic Inspiration die, a d6 for now, and add it to any failed d20 test, potentially turning that failure into a success. So good. We also get Bard spells here, and there are so many wonderful ones to choose from. Starry Wisp makes a decent ranged damage option. Friends and Light are great for utility, especially for the non-dark visioned among us. Vicious Mockery is a fantastic cantrip that can deal damage with an insult and debuff an enemy. Fairy Fire and Bane are probably my go-to concentration options at this level to either grant advantage on attacks against enemies, in the case of Fairy Fire, or debuff enemies on their attacks and saving throws via Bane. Sleep, Hideous Laughter are also great for concentration if we're looking for a control option. I also love Dissonant Whispers to deal damage and cause an enemy to flee, potentially even prompting an opportunity attack from us. Finally, I would be sure to grab a heal in the form of either Cure Wounds or Healing Word. Both are great, depending on if you want to heal more with a touch and an action, or a little less, but from range and with a bonus action, right? Good luck choosing here. I want all of these spells. At level 3, we would be a Bard 2, and that means we get Expertise, first of all. And I'll just say, pick your favorites here, PYF. It lets you double your proficiency bonus in 2 skills that you're proficient in. I think if it were me on this character with a good charisma, yeah, I'd be a solid party face, so I might want to take, a social skill. Probably Intimidation feels appropriate on a brute bard like ourselves, but Perception is always useful, especially for those of us with a terrible wisdom score. And Performance feels like almost a must-have on a bard, right? But maybe you're a shy bard and you only like to perform in battle. I don't know. We also get Jack of all trades, which is an awesome utility buff, letting us add half of our proficiency bonus to any ability check that uses a skill proficiency we lack. At level 4, we would be a Bard 3, and that means that we get our Bard subclass, and we naturally are going with the College of Valor. They got so much love in 2024 and are absolutely perfect for what we're going to be trying to do today. As a Valor Bard, we get 2 features here. Martial Training gives us proficiency with martial weapons and medium armor and shields, which we don't need thanks to our fighter dip, but also says that we can use a weapon as a spellcasting focus to cast Bard spells, and that's appreciated, though not particularly necessary when you're using a 2-handed weapon, right? I think you can always sort of plant the weapon on the ground and use a hand for somatic and or verbal components, even if the weapon wasn't a spell focus. We also get Combat Inspiration, which is just another way for our allies to use the inspiration that we give them, letting them add the inspiration die to their armor class against a single attack that hits them, potentially causing that attack to miss. Bit of a poor man's shield spell for your allies, it's not bad. Or lets them add the inspiration die to the damage they deal when they hit with an attack roll. That's going to be an ill-advised use of Bardic Inspiration, I think, most of the time, unless they feel confident that the enemy only has 1 or 2 hit points left, right? You're much better off turning a miss into a hit or a failed save into a success than you are adding 3 points of damage to an attack most of the time, right? We also get 2nd level Bard spells here, and while yes, Aid, Blindness, Deafness, Hold Person, Invisibility, Lesser Restoration, Mirror Image, and more are all wonderful, the one we want to focus on is that old love of mine that used to be so oft maligned, Cloud of Daggers. Cloud of Daggers is cast as an action. It requires our concentration and forms a 5-foot cube of spinning blades that does 4d4 slashing damage with no saving throw. That's huge. No more than once per turn to an enemy when the area of the effect first forms on or moves onto a character space, right? Or when the character first moves into its space, or nerfed now for 2024, when the character ends their space in the cloud as opposed to when they start their turn there like it used to be. As a result, it's a lot tougher to get an enemy to take damage from Cloud of Daggers more than once per round, though it is still possible. And it's a big part of why I haven't been using it a lot in builds over the last year. It's still solid though, and did get a little love in that the cloud can be moved now at least 30 feet on your turn though it does cost your action to do so. The damage for it scales by a respectable 2d4 when you upcast it, and we'll talk about tactics for using the spell in a minute. At level 5, we would be a Bard 4, and that means we get our first general feat, and we want Great Weapon Master because it's amazing. It bumps our strength by 1 to 18, and then says that if we hit with a heavy weapon specifically, as part of the attack action on our turn specifically, that bit bums me out a little, then we can do damage equal to our proficiency bonus. We won't actually be taking advantage of this for a couple of levels on this build because keep in mind that at this level, level 5, right, Booming Blade goes up to 1d8 when we hit with it and then 2d8 if they move, and that is going to be very important for our Catch-22 selves, as we'll get into shortly. And casting Booming Blade, while it does in fact include a weapon attack, is very specifically not the same thing as taking the attack action, and thus no Great Weapon Master damage for now, which makes me sad. It's okay, we won't suffer for very long, and I mean, heck, maybe your DM will allow you to add the damage since you're using your action to cast the spell and making a weapon attack. It's worth asking. At level 6, we would be a Bard 5, and we don't get extra attack yet, unfortunately, but we do get lots of love still at this level. Font of Inspiration says that our inspirations reset on a short rest now, which is wonderful, especially since those Bardic Inspiration die go up to a d8 here. And then we also get 3rd level spells, which is sort of the promised land for full casters, right? Letting us pick up that trifecta of wonderful control spells, Fear, Hypnotic Pattern, and Slow, but also useful things like Dispel Magic, Catnap, Tiny Hut, and more. We, of course, being fools, are going to be concentrating on Cloud of Daggers, though, of course, you could and should throw down some powerful control instead when the urge strikes you and or the situation calls for it. Hooray for versatility. Okay, at level 6, let's finally get into the tactics of combat that I keep alluding to here in our first damage report. Here's what I think combat will ideally look like for us at this level. On round 1, we would be casting Cloud of Daggers on our target, upcast at the 3rd level, right, dealing 6d4 damage to them. With our bonus action, I'd say throw out a Bardic Inspiration. We'd then want to position ourselves like 10 feet away from the enemy, hoping that they would move up to attack us on their turn, but if they decide not to and try and run the other way, well, at least we'll still get an opportunity attack because we've got reach with our pike, right? On subsequent rounds, we are simply going to be casting Booming Blade with our action, hitting them with our pike, making the attack with advantage, thanks to our familiar, and pushing them, thanks to the weapon mastery, back into that Cloud of Daggers. We'd also add one of our Frost Giant Frost's Chill uses to deal an extra d6 of damage, but more importantly, slow them by 10 feet to keep them from getting too far away from the cloud on subsequent rounds. If we hit them, we would be dealing damage from the weapon, from Booming Blade, from Cloud of Daggers, from our strength, from Frost's Chill, and putting them into that Catch-22 scenario. On their turn, if they move, they'll take 2d8 Booming Blade damage. If they don't move, well, they'd probably be mostly useless on their turn, depending on the enemy, but they'll also take 6d4 slashing damage, which is worse. So yeah, they probably move, but they're slowed, so hopefully not too far. And then just rinse and repeat. One note. To get things going a little quicker, we could start with 2 levels of fighter before getting Bard levels so that we could grab Action Surge and then right on round 1 cast Cloud of Daggers and knock an enemy into it with Booming Blade and slowing them, right? I would probably go that route if the campaign is going to end at level 8 or sooner. We're going to have a way to deal with that before too long, and I really hated delaying Bard 6 more than I had to, so I went the route I did. But yeah, feel free to make a different choice. Anyways, from round 2 on, if everything goes according to plan, we'll be doing 1d10 plus 3d8 plus 1d6 plus 6d4 plus 4 damage every round. And averaged over a 4-round combat encounter, against enemies with a 10 armor class, we would do 36 damage per round on average. And against a 15 AC, it would be 32 DPR. And compared to other DPR builds that I've done to date at this level, that's okay. Call it like bottom, maybe middle of tier 2. So yeah, not blowing the doors off of anything, but hey, we're a bard. Inspiring, potentially buffing, healing, even controlling if we wanted. Bringing tons of utility. I'm not sad about that kind of damage. And actually, the truth is that if Valor Bards got weapon masteries, and a lot of you argue that they should, I know, then the damage would be way higher if we just went straight Bard 6 to this point. I don't mind sacrificing some damage for better survivability and concentration checks though, among other things, so I'm not sad. Next level, we're going to get a huge bump. So, at level 7, we would be a Bard 6, and yes, as a Valor Bard, that means we finally get extra attack. But not just any extra attack, we get the Bladesinger extra attack, which lets us cast one of our cantrips that has a casting time of an action in place of one of those attacks. So this is where everything really comes together. Now we can take the attack action, make a weapon attack, add the Great Weapon Master bonus damage, and then make a Booming Blade attack, still adding the Great Weapon Master damage to it as well, since yes, technically we're making a weapon attack with a heavy weapon as part of the attack action, even when we're doing Booming Blade now, right? So much better. And yeah, it should enable our tactic to work a lot better as well. Okay. At level 8, now that we've got extra attack, I think it's time to do a little more multi-classing. There are actually two other classes that I'd love to dip into with this build, and I'm a little torn on which way to go first, but I think I'd want to go Sorcerer first, so let's assume we're doing that. Why Sorcerer on your character? Maybe your arcane-infused battle chants or stories have created some kind of surge of magical power inside of you, morphing or mutating into increased power. Maybe the blood of your frost giant ancestors has somehow matured within you, causing a development of new mage-like abilities. Whatever your reason, as a Sorcerer 1, we get Innate Sorcery, which says that twice per day, as a bonus action, we can buff ourselves for 1 minute so that the DC of our sorcerer spells specifically increases by 1. That's nice. But also so that we have advantage on the attack rolls of sorcerer spells we cast. That's awesome. And we will be using it on this build, thank you very much, because we also get sorcerer spells here. And while there are plenty that I'd be happy to have, sure, grab Sleep as a sorcerer spell to give it a better DC when using Innate Sorcery, right? I'll say to prioritize Shield for a nice defensive buff with our reaction, though be careful when using it since that will keep us from taking an opportunity attack if an enemy tries to run from us, right? And then you might want to take Booming Blade here. Wait, what? We already have Booming Blade. We even sacrificed our origin feat to get it. What the crap? I know. It seems a little redundant, but let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up. I want to have advantage on my Booming Blade attacks. I have Innate Sorcery that now gives advantage on attack rolls of specifically sorcerer spells that I cast. And yes, I'm making an attack roll with Booming Blade. Even if it's not a spell attack, it should qualify here. The question is, would picking up Booming Blade via the Magic Initiate Wizard feat, like we did, allow the spell to count as a sorcerer spell for the purpose of Innate Sorcery, or do we need to take the spell as a sorcerer spell here at Sorcerer 1? This may seem silly, but it's actually an important point to clarify for something that we're going to do later with this build, so stick with me for a minute if you don't mind. If you do mind, and you don't care about getting into the weeds here, feel free to skip ahead a couple of minutes. In the recent Sage Advice Compendium, we see this question. Which of a character's spells count as class spells? For example, if I'm playing a sorcerer, which of my character's spells are sorcerer spells? The answer we're given to that question is, a class's spell list specifies the spells that belong to the class. For example, a sorcerer spell is a spell on the sorcerer spell list, and if a sorcerer knows spells that aren't on that list, those spells aren't sorcerer spells unless a feature says otherwise. Okay, so under this reading, since Booming Blade is on the sorcerer spell list, it should be considered a sorcerer spell, or, for that matter, also an artificer, wizard, or warlock spell. That's important, put a pin in that. And this is regardless of the fact that we learned the spell via the Magic Initiate feat. Meaning, then, that we should be able to benefit from Innate Sorcery when we cast the spell, even though we didn't learn it as a sorcerer because it's on the sorcerer spell list. But if your DM says poo-poo to that, then sure, grab Booming Blade here. Okay, you still with me? Good. Like I say, this info is going to be important later. At this stage, it might just let us learn another cantrip. At level 9, we'd be a sorcerer too, and that means we get Font of Magic, our sorcery points, right? Which we get 1 of per sorcerer level. They reset on a long rest, and we can cannibalize them to create more spell slots or cannibalize our spell slots for more sorcery points, right? Without even needing to use a bonus action to do so anymore, which is great, because we also can use those sorcery points for meta magic, right at level 2 now. And of the 2 options that we get to pick, just be sure to grab my old favorite, Quicken Spell, which says that for 2 sorcery points, we can cast a spell with a casting time of an action as a bonus action instead. And this is just so very wonderful for everything that we are trying to do. As for the second option for meta magic, pick your favorite here, PYF. I think I'd probably go with Subtle Spell. All right. At level 9, it is time for our next damage report, and a lot has changed for us tactically in just the last few levels, so let's get into it. On round 1, we're going to be casting Cloud of Daggers with our action again on top of our target, but then with our bonus action, we'll be getting Innate Sorcery going. If you feel confident that combat is about to break out, whether because the villain is monologuing or your rogue has scouted ahead and you're about to jump some baddies, then try to get innate sorcery going before combat starts instead, right? That would be awesome. I'm not going to assume that that's happening, but if it did, you could quicken Cloud of Daggers and make attacks with your turn, and that would be great. On subsequent rounds, we'll be taking the attack action to make a regular pike attack against them, pushing them if need be, then making a booming blade attack as part of the attack action, pushing them again if need be. Because remember, the push weapon mastery says that you can do this every time you hit. It's not like a once per turn limitation, and that's great. And then finally, use Quicken Spell to make yet another booming blade attack with our bonus action, even pushing them a third time if need be. Alternatively, if you don't need to push them so much, I love the idea of, say, starting out with a maul and trying to topple the enemy first, right? Then stowing that weapon as part of the attack that you made with it, which you can do now, and then drawing your pike as part of your booming blade attack so that you can push them but have advantage on the attack since the enemy is prone, even if you don't have innate sorcery active. Or, for that matter, if your DM rules that booming blade doesn't benefit from innate sorcery. Then, on the enemy's turn, they would have to use half their move speed to stand and would be slowed by your Frost Giant Goliath self, meaning that they would probably only have 5 feet of movement on their turn, 15 if they started with 40 feet of movement, right? It's kind of amazing. We could potentially upcast Cloud of Daggers to a 4th level spell now, if we wanted, and keep in mind that Great Weapon Master would only deal damage to the attacks we make with our action, but averaged over 4 rounds. Against enemies with a 10 armor class, we would now do 66 damage per round, and against a 16 AC, it would be 61 DPR. And that is almost double since last check. That's awesome. And it puts us well into tier 1 territory now compared to other DPR builds that I've done to date at this level. Check the video description to see those spreadsheets, comparing them all together and breaking down the numbers. If you didn't know, I put them there every week. Now, yes, we are burning through spell slots here if we want to keep using Quicken Spell every round, so it ain't cheap. But even if you're not getting a bonus action booming blade every round, you're still doing really solid damage and just really stressing your enemies out with the Catch-22. And hey, you'd have a bonus action free, so you can, actually inspire your allies. You are a bard, after all. There are no bad options here. It's freaking awesome. All right, at level 10, with Quicken Spell under our belt, I think we want to take some Warlock levels, but it's not a no-brainer and it's potentially controversial, so hang on as we get into that in a minute. For now, if you decide to go this route with me, make sure to have a good reason for doing so if your DM is going to want one, right? Perhaps you were coerced into a pact in order to save someone you love, or you made a deal with the devil in order to increase your own power. But keep in mind that Warlock pacts don't always have to be with an evil patron. Maybe a demigod frost giant has heard tales of your valor or seen your prowess on the battlefield and literally wants to patronize you, supporting you with a portion of their power so that your name and story will rise to greater heights, thus glorifying frost giant kind, right? You might have been in talks with this being from level 1, but only now have decided to accept their offer. Whatever your reasons for doing so, at level 10, as a Warlock 1, we first up get a single Eldritch Invocation, and I would 100% grab Eldritch Mind here so that we can have advantage on our concentration checks. Together with Constitution saving throw proficiency, our concentration checks are in a very good place here. Now, I'm guessing that a lot of you are thinking that we should have gone Warlock a lot earlier, maybe even at level 2, to pick up Pact of the Blade so that we could be a more sad, single ability score dependent, like charisma-focused character, right? I thought about it. I even made that my original plan. But the truth is, knowing that Great Weapon Master requires a 13 strength, and I definitely wanted that feat, and then it bumps our strength by 1, right? Meaning we'd have a 14 strength minimum here, which meant I wasn't going to have enough points to put into dexterity for armor class purposes. If I wanted a decent constitution score at least, then I was going to need heavy armor. And since I was already at a 14 strength, I might as well prioritize strength, right? So I could wear heavy armor without having to worry about suffering a move speed penalty. And at that point, it just kind of made a lot more sense to just be a strength first character. The build looks a lot better at level 6, especially, right? With my eye on that damage report, by getting our strength to 18, going the route that I did. It just didn't make as much sense to go for a Pact of the Blade build with this today, I don't think. If I were starting the character at like level 8 or higher, sure, maybe. Just settle for like a 15 strength and focus more on your charisma. But still, at this level, if we'd taken Great Weapon Master as our first feat, at least, we'd only have a 17 charisma at best. So it'd be a while until we could get it to 18 and then 20. There are, of course, other benefits to a high charisma, but yeah, strength first just made the most sense to me for the build. And plus, a strength-based bard, come on, that's just awesome. I've only done that once, or maybe twice. Anyways, we're here now, no regrets. We also get Warlock spells here, and I'd probably take the usuals: Eldritch Blast for a nice ranged attack, Armor of Agathis for some temporary hit points that returns damage to melee attackers, cold damage even, very on point thematically, but most importantly, of course, Booming Blade. Wait, what? We already have Booming Blade. We even sacrificed our origin feat to get it. And a cantrip at Sorcerer 1, potentially. What the crap? Okay, let me explain more, because if there's anything this video needs, it's more explaining. I will. Give me a second, because at level 11, we'd be a Warlock 2, right? And that means we get 2 more invocations. And guess what? Agonizing Blast and Repelling Blast aren't just tied to Eldritch Blast anymore, right? In 2024. They work for any Warlock cantrip, and according to the Sage Advice Compendium that we were talking about a few minutes ago, since Booming Blade is on the Warlock spell list, it should count as a Warlock spell for our purposes here, even if we didn't learn this spell as a Warlock spell at Warlock level 1, right? Go back and watch that part where I was explaining it if you're confused, but you skipped it. Because yeah, I really want to both have advantage on my Booming Blade attacks via innate sorcery and be able to add damage to them equal to my charisma modifier via the Agonizing Blast cantrip, and more importantly, with Repelling Blast, be able to push our target 10 feet straight away from us when we hit them with Booming Blade. And since that would stack with our Pike push weapon mastery, right, moving an enemy 20 feet with a single Booming Blade attack just feels really cool. And like, keeping them shoved into Cloud of Daggers every turn should be even easier to do, so long as they're large or smaller anyways. And sure, if they're not that far away from the cloud, we can use a Maul instead to keep trying to knock them prone and still push them with Booming Blade. But just to kind of nail down the point here, yeah, a couple of weeks ago, I put out a poll on my channel asking how you all would rule this at your table. Could Booming Blade benefit from both innate sorcery and Eldritch invocations at the same time? Most of you said yes, a little more than twice as many as those who said no, whether because you thought the rules allowed for it, as I've explained, or just because you thought it was cool, and sure, why not? That said, if you're going to try and make this happen, please, please, please talk it over with your DM beforehand. They might not interpret the Sage Advice ruling the same way that I, and actually, Treant Monk, Chris, yeah, we talked this over. There's my trump card. You know, I don't like that. I'm calling that the Treant Monk card from now on. It's much better. But yeah, if they don't interpret it the same way that we do, right, then you got to clarify that. Or, I mean, they might say, you know what, I'll allow this, but you have to prepare the spell as both a sorcerer and a warlock spell as attacks. Or they might say, so long as you don't prepare the spell as either a sorcerer or a warlock, so it doesn't mess with the multi-classing and spells stuff. Because the Sage Advice Compendium also talks about that, and I just know some of you are going to comment about that and think that it's a gotcha, but it's not. I'm not going to get into it because I already spent way too much time on this already. Talk to your DM. I say it works. Most of you seem to as well. Let's move on. Don't forget that at this level, level 11, Booming Blade goes up to 2d8 on a hit and 3d8 if they move, which is great. And also at Warlock 2, we get Magical Cunning. I almost forgot. That lets us recover half of our Warlock spell slots. We have 2 now, right? Once per day with a 1-minute little seance. Cool. At level 12, Warlock subclasses are awesome, but I would prefer to go back to full spellcaster so that we can scale the damage from our Cloud of Daggers, among other things. That means that I'm going to take another level of fighter. I mean, come on, Action Surge is just right there, and it's so good. This would let me, on round 1, use my bonus action for innate sorcery, then cast Cloud of Daggers, then Action Surge to make a couple of attacks so that I can get my slow and maybe even topple going right on round 1. It's just going to make it a lot easier to keep my whole shtick working if I can slow and or prone enemies right from the get-go, in case they're really smart and keep trying to run away from me, you know? Or, sure, give me some nice burst damage potential if I'm not too worried about my enemies running. You might have wanted to do this right at level 2 like I've talked about, or, you know, maybe after Sorcerer 2. I know we're a little all over the place with the levels here, but at level 13, yeah, let's get back to full caster. And I think we should just go back to Bard, unless you really want a Sorcerer subclass. But I want to be a Bard 7, which we'd be here because it's going to give me Counter Charm, first of all, which is great now, letting us use our reaction to cause a failed save against being charmed or frightened to be re-rolled, with advantage even. And it works for us or an ally within 30 feet. But also, yeah, I mean, 4th level Bard spells, right? Dimension Door, Polymorph, Greater Invisibility, Psychic Lance, all are great and worth considering, but go ahead and PYF here. What I'm most excited about is the fact that, thanks to multiclassing, we've got a 5th level spell slot to upcast Cloud of Daggers to 10d6 of no save damage, at least once around, if we were willing to blow the spell slot on it, and that's just in time for our next damage report. Okay. Since last check, we've gained a lot of damage increases. We got a 1d8 damage increase to Booming Blade, and are also adding 3 to each of our Booming Blade attacks thanks to Agonizing Blast, as well as pushing them potentially 10 feet more with Repelling Blast, right? Increased Cloud of Daggers damage to 10d6 per round, potentially gained Action Surge to make that opening round a lot more potent and reliable, and added some nice utility, support, defense, and even control potential. And so, against enemies with a 10 armor class now, we would do 102 damage per round on average over 4 rounds. And against a 17 AC, it would be 95 DPR. And wee-wee, we passed the century mark, even at level 13, against low AC enemies at least. That's awesome, and it puts us near the top of tier 1 now compared to other DPR builds to date at this level. Very cool, very fun, lots of potential. So let's take it to the end and see what happens, yeah? At level 14, we would be a Bard 8, and that means we get another feat so that we can finally cap our strength at 20, right? Oof, so much multiclassing. Obviously, we could have gotten here sooner if we would have skipped those Warlock levels and that Fighter level. Feel free to prioritize this if you want. At level 15, we would be a Bard 9. That means we get another round of expertise, and go ahead and PYF. Now we could have expertise in all of the social skills and performance. Ultimate Bard. We also get 5th level Bard spells here, and, Dominate Person, Hold Monster, Greater Restoration, so many good ones to choose from, but go ahead and PYF. Don't forget, we do get a 6th level spell slot here now, thanks to multiclassing with Sorcerer. At level 16, we would be a Bard 10, and that means we get Magical Secrets. How did I take 16 levels to get to Magical Secrets? Crazy person. So yeah, one of the best features in the game, honestly, letting us take spells from the Bard, Druid, Cleric, or even Wizard spell lists. So what do we take? I think Wall of Force feels like a no-brainer for one of the best control spells in game, trapping enemies behind a force field with no saving throw. But you know what else I really want here? Misty Step. Yeah, how silly that we don't have Misty Step yet. I'm just thinking that even though we've got 35 feet of movement and are slowing and potentially even proning our enemies, right? So we should be able to get around them and push them back into our cloud most of the time, even if they're trying to run away from us. But sometimes they might succeed on their save to be knocked prone. Sometimes they might have a ton of movement. Or we might have killed our primary target and the closest one is like 30, 40 feet away from our cloud of daggers, right? In that case, yeah, being able to bamf 30 feet as a bonus action is really going to help us get in the right position to keep pushing enemies into Cloud of Daggers without having to sacrifice our action to move it. Though, note, if we did have to do that, at least it's nice to know that we could make a Quicken Spell Booming Blade attack and potentially push them 20 feet. So yeah, Misty Step is important, and we absolutely might have wanted to prioritize getting it a long time ago. And, there are several ways we could have gotten here. One more level in Sorcerer or Warlock. Archfey Warlock would be especially nice here, right? For lots of extra teleporting. We could have gone Cloud Giant Goliath instead of Frost. Or, sure, just a totally different species like Eladrin or something. Also, if we wanted to change things up and prioritize Charisma over Strength here, if we were going for a Pact of the Blade build, right? Then grabbing the Fey Touched Feet would have been awesome. Free Misty Step. And, +1 to Charisma. Anyways, we've got it now. Feel free to grab it sooner via some other method if you're finding that you're really needing it. Finally, for us, at level 17, we would be a Bard 11, and that means we get 6th level Bard spells, and I kind of feel like you sort of have to go either Hero's Feast or Mass Suggestion for either an incredible party-wide buff with Hero's Feast or basically an encounter-ending control option with Mass Suggestion. But feel free to go another route if you really want. But then also, we get a 7th level spell slot thanks to multiclassing, and Booming Blade gets its final bump, right? 3d8 on a hit, 4d8 if and when they move, and move they will because they don't want to be stuck in Cloud of Daggers. This brings us to our final damage report. Since last check, we've seen another bump to our Booming Blade damage, capped our strength score, gained the ability to upcast Cloud of Daggers to 14d8 per turn if we really wanted, and as usual, picked up lots of great support, utility, and control options along the way. But against enemies with a 10 armor class, now, on average, over 4 rounds, we'd do 130 damage per round, and against an 18 AC, it would be 124 DPR. And compared to other DPR builds I've done to date at this level, that keeps us just kind of middle of tier 1 still, with all the versatility and diversity we get from being mostly a bard. So, Let's go over some final thoughts here. The tier score for this build, if you take the damage they do at each of the enemy armor classes we calculate for, at each of the 4 damage reports, just average it all into one big number, we end up with a 74, which is near the top of tier 1, and that's kind of amazing. So, okay, how well would this build actually work in game? I can see a lot of people thinking, or even commenting something like, this build won't work at my table because the whole Agonizing Blast and Repelling Blast and Innate Sorcery all working at the same time with Booming Blade is gobbledygook. But here's the thing. Even if you can't or don't want to go for that, too much multiclassing, whatever, it's fine. The actual damage increase that we get from Agonizing Blast on that Booming Blade attack is almost exactly the same as just putting 2 more levels into either Sorcerer or Bard, right? Since we could have thus scaled Cloud of Daggers up higher, potentially, right? And we only ever had a +3 Charisma, the way I built it anyways. I wanted to go that Warlock route more for the extra pushing and frankly for the Eldritch Mind Invocation and some cheap spell slots that reset on a short rest for more sorcery points, among other things, more than I did for the Agonizing Blast damage. In the end, I kind of see this build as more like a rough draft for something for you to take and make your own than anything. And, you know, if I'm being honest, I kind of feel that way about all of my builds. This channel, these build ideas are always more of a playground for you to get ideas from than a hard, this build only works if you do exactly what I say, etc., etc. But yeah, the core of the build, getting a pike, hitting enemies with Booming Blade, pushing them into Cloud of Daggers to set up a Catch-22 so that they are going to take damage on their turn whether they move or not, it's all there by level 4, really. And from there, have fun with it. You want to take a bunch of sorcerer levels for those spells and more meta magic and sorcerer points in a subclass? Go for it. You want more warlock levels for a subclass there and more invocations and maybe even Eldritch Smite later and really go all in on charisma and Pact of the Blade? Go for it. You want to just stick with Bard and a fighter dip? That works too. And man, the core of it just sets you up to have so much fun with the build in game, I think. Pushing enemies around the battlefield is just fun when you have a reliable hazard to be pushing them into. And coupling that with a damned if you do, damned if you don't rider, along with all the fun versatility and support potential that comes from being a bard, and a hulking brute of a strength-based bard even, that's pushing and tripping enemies around the battlefield with a pike and a maul, this just feels like a veritable playground of good times. And the fact that it can hit as hard as it does, if you want it to, and with the right enemies, of course, is just gravy on what I think would be a really powerful, diverse blast of a character to play with. So that's the build for the week, and I hope you enjoyed it. I absolutely had a great time putting this one together. I love you guys. Thank you so much for all that you do for me and for this channel. It really means the world to me. I hope you have a fantastic day and a great week, and if you don't, I really, really, really hope that you'll hang in there. Do something kind for yourself today. You deserve it. I hope that you'll do good and be kind, and that I see you again very soon. But until then, take care. Bye. Hey, put the world away. Fight a little longer until you feel okay. Wait for the sunlight. Love or leave, what life would I lose? Ooh la la, ooh la 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 la, don't you wanna feel it too? Heal your heart with rhythm and blues. Ooh la la, ooh la 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 la, don't you wanna feel it too? Ooh la la, ooh la 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 la, don't you wanna feel it too? Man, I know I've sung a song by the Well Pennies recently, but they are just like everything for me right now. I don't know if it's just because there's so much going on in the world to make me not feel super happy and excited or what, but man, it is just a shot of sunshine in my life whenever I listen to them. So check them out if you have not yet. The Well Pennies, they're amazing. I don't even know if they're making new music anymore these days, but what they already have out there is so worth listening to. As a weapon, which I'll talk about in to inspire our and a lot argue that you surge of magic. All right. But most important, since we could have go for it. Okay.